gather round the Christmas tree and get your hot cocoa, because tonight we're going to be reading The Nutcracker and the Mouse King by E.T.A. Hoffman. This is an old classic, a favorite of mine. It inspired an episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog, and it's just a good little cozy vibe for the season. So, get cozy and enjoy. Chapter 1, Christmas Eve. During the long, long day of the 24th of December, the children of Dr. Stahlbaum were not permitted to enter the parlor, much less the adjoining drawing room. Frederic and Maria sat nestled together in the corner of the back chamber. Dusky twilight had come on, and they felt quite gloomy and fearful, for as was commonly the case on this day, no light was brought into them. Fred, in great secrecy and in a whisper, informed his little sister, who was only just 7 years old, that ever since morning he had heard a rustling and a rattling, and now and then a gentle knocking in the forbidden chambers. He'd seen a dark little man with a large chest under his arm gliding softly through the entry, but he knew very well that it was nobody but Godfather Drosselmeyer. Upon this, Maria clapped her little hands together with joy. She exclaimed, "Ah, what beautiful things has Godfather Drosselmeyer made for us this time!" Counselor Drosselmeyer was not a very handsome man. He was small and thin, had many wrinkles over his face, and over his right eye had a large black patch. And he was without hair, for which reason he wore a very nice white wig. This was made of glass, however, and was a very ingenious piece of work. The godfather himself was also very ingenious. He understood all about clocks and watches and could even make them. Accordingly, when any one of the beautiful clocks in Dr. Stahlbaum's house was sick and could not sing, Drosselmeyer would have to attend to it. He would take off his glass wig, pull off his brown coat, don a blue apron, and pierce the clock with sharp-pointed instruments, which usually caused little Maria a great deal of anxiety. But it did the clock no harm. On the contrary, it became quite lively again, and began at once right merrily to rattle and strike and sing, so that it was a pleasure to all who heard it. Whenever he came, he always brought something pretty in his pocket for the children. Sometimes a little man who moved his eyes and made a bow, at others a box from which a little bird hopped out when it was opened. Sometimes one thing, sometimes another. When Christmas Eve came, he always had a beautiful piece of work prepared for them, which had cost him a great deal of trouble, and on this account it was always carefully preserved by their parents after he had given it to them. "Ah, what beautiful present has Godfather Drosselmeyer made for us this time!" exclaimed Maria. It was Fred's opinion that this time it could be nothing other than a castle, in which all kinds of fine soldiers marched up and down and went through their exercises. Then other soldiers would come and try to break into the castle, but the soldiers within would fire off their cannons very bravely till all roared and cracked again. "No, no," cried Maria, interrupting him. "Godfather Drosselmeyer has told me of a lovely garden where there's a great lake, upon which beautiful swans swim about, with golden collars around their necks, and they sing the sweetest songs. Then comes a little girl out of the garden down along the lake and coaxes the swans to the shore and feeds them with sweet cake." "Swans don't eat cake," interrupted Fred somewhat roughly, "and even Godfather Drosselmeyer himself can't make us a whole garden. In fact, we have little good of his playthings anyway. They're all taken right away from us again. I like what Papa and Mama give us much better, for we can keep their presents for ourselves and do with them as we please." The children now once again began to guess what it could be this time. Maria thought that Miss Trutchen, her great doll, was growing very old, for she fell almost every moment upon the floor, and more awkwardly than ever, which could not happen without leaving sad marks upon her face, and as to neatness in dress, this was now altogether out of the question with her. Scolding did not help the matter in the least. Frederic declared, on the other hand, that a bay horse was wanting in his stable, and his troops were very deficient in cavalry, as his papa very well knew. By this time it had become quite dark. Frederic and Maria sat close together and did not venture again to speak a word. It seemed now as if soft wings rustled around them, and a very distant but sweet music was heard at intervals. At a moment, a shrill sound broke upon their ears. Klingling, klingling. The doors flew wide open, and such a dazzling light broke out from the great chamber that with the loud exclamation, "Ah!" the children stood fixed at the threshold. But Papa and Mamma stepped to the door, took them by the hand, and said, "Come, come, dear children, and see what Christmas has brought you this year." Chapter 2. The Gifts. Kind reader or listener, whatever may be your name, whether Amu or Austin, Ula or Andrew, Eleanor or Anna or Lizzie or Ida, I beg you, call to mind the table covered in your last Christmas gifts, as in their newest gloss they first appeared in your delighted vision. You will then be able to imagine the astonishment of the children as they stood with sparkling eyes, unable to utter a word for the joy at the sight before them. At last Maria called out with a deep sigh, "Oh, how beautiful, how beautiful!" And Frederic gave 2 or 3 leaps in the air, higher than he had ever done before. The children must have been very obedient and good children during the past year, for never on any Christmas Eve before had so many beautiful things been given to them. A tall fir tree stood in the middle of the room, covered with gold and silver apples, while sugar almonds, comfits, lemon drops, and every kind of confectionery hung like buds and blossoms upon all its branches. But the greatest beauty of this wonderful tree were the many little lights that sparkled amidst its dark boughs, which like stars illuminated its treasures, or like friendly eyes seemed to invite the children to partake of the blossoms and fruit. The table under the tree shone and flushed with 1,000 different colors. Oh, what beautiful things were there! Who could describe them? Maria spied the prettiest dolls, a tea set, all kinds of nice furniture, and what eclipsed all the rest, a silk dress tastefully ornamented with beautiful ribbons, which hung upon a frame before her eyes, so that she could view it on every side. This she did, too, and exclaimed over and over again, "Oh, the sweet, oh, the dear, dear frock, may I put it on? Yes, yes, may I really, though, wear it?" In the meanwhile, Fred had been galloping round and round the room, trying his new bay horse, which, true enough, he had found, fastened by its bridle to the table. Dismounting again, he said it was a wild creature, but that was nothing. He would soon break him. He then reviewed his new regiment of hussars, who were very elegantly arrayed in red and gold, and carried silver weapons, and rode upon such bright shining horses that you would almost believe these were of pure silver too. The children had now become somewhat more composed, and turned to the picture books which lay upon the table, where all kinds of beautiful flowers and gaily dressed people, and the boys and girls at play, were painted as natural as if they were alive. Yes, the children had just turned to these singular books when, cling-cling, cling-cling, the bell was heard again. They knew that Godfather Drosselmeyer was now about to display his Christmas gift, and ran toward a table that stood against the wall, covered by a curtain reaching from the ceiling to the floor. The curtain behind which he had remained so long concealed was quickly drawn aside, and what saw the children? Upon a green meadow, spangled with flowers, stood a noble castle with clear glass windows and golden turrets. a musical clock began to play, when the doors and windows flew open, and little men and women, with feathers in their hats and long flowing trains, were seen sauntering about the rooms. In the middle hall, which seemed as if it were on fire, so many little tapers were burning in silver chandeliers. There were children in white frocks and green jackets dancing to the sound of the music. A man in an emerald green cloak at intervals put his head out the window, nodded, and then disappeared. And Godfather Drosselmeyer himself, only that he was not much bigger than Papa's thumb, came now and then to the door of the castle, looked about him, and then went in again. Fred, with his arms resting upon the table, gazed at the beautiful castle and the little walking and dancing figures, and then said, "Godfather Drosselmeyer, let me go into your castle." The counselor gave him to understand that it could not be done, and he was right, for it was foolish of Fred to wish to go into a castle which, with all its golden turrets, was not even as high as his head. Fred saw that likewise himself. After a while, as the men and women kept walking back and forth, and the children danced, and the Emerald Man looked out the window, and Godfather Drosselmeyer came to the door, and all without the least change, Fred called out impatiently, "Godfather Drosselmeyer, come out this time at the other door." "That can never be done, dear Fred," said the counselor. "Well then," continued Fred, "let the green man who peeps out the window walk with the rest." "And that can never be," rejoined the counselor. "Then the children must come down," cried Fred. "I want to see them nearer." "And that can never be, I say," replied the counselor, a little out of humor. "As the mechanism is made, so it must remain." "So," cried Fred in a drawling tone, "all that can never be. Listen, Godfather Drosselmeyer, if your little dressed-up figures in the castle there can do naught else but the same thing, they are not good for much, and I care very little about them. No, give me my hussars, who can maneuver backwards and forwards as I order them, and are not shut up in a house." With this he darted towards a large table, drew up his regiment upon their silver horses, and let them trot and gallop and cut and slash to his heart's content. Maria had also softly stolen away, for she too was soon tired of the sauntering and dancing puppets in the castle. But as she was very amiable and good, she did not wish it to be observed so plainly as it was with her brother Fred. Councillor Drosselmeyer turned to the parents and said, somewhat angrily, "An ingenious work like this was not made for stupid children. I will put up my castle again and carry it home." But their mother now stepped forward and desired to see the secret mechanism and curious works by which the little figures were set in motion. The counselor took it all apart and put it back together again. While he was employed in this manner, he became good-natured once more, and gave the children some nice brown men and women with gilt faces, hands, and feet. They were all made of sweet thorn and smelt of gingerbread, at which Frederic and Maria were greatly delighted. At her mother's request, the elder sister Louise had put on the new dress which had been given to her, and she looked most charmingly in it. But Maria, when it came for her turn, thought she would like a look at hers a while longer as it hung. This was readily permitted.